Hey there, my name is Doug and this is my boat, Slow Bells, a Marine Trader 38 trawler. I bought the boat a couple years ago and I've been mostly working on it since then, tearing out stuff, putting in new stuff, your general destruction and mayhem boat ownership program. If you own a boat, you know the drill, right? Anyway, I decided in April of 2018 to put away the tools for a couple of weeks and take the boat on a shakedown cruise. For a destination, I chose the Albemarle Loop. Albemarle Sound is located in northeastern North Carolina, not too far south of Norfolk, Virginia. If you're traveling up or down the Intracoastal Waterway, you're going to clip the eastern edge of Albemarle Sound as you pass through that area. The sound's about 45 miles in length, and it has a number of towns located around the perimeter of the sound. The idea of the Albemarle Loop is that you basically circumnavigate this sound and stop in to the towns along the way, and I'm sure the local merchants hope that you bring along your Visa card. There's also a website giving more detailed information on the towns and marinas and events along the Albemarle Loop, and I'll put a link to that in the comments below. From my marina in Norfolk's Little Creek Inlet, the road to Albemarle Sound involves traveling up the western shoreline of the Chesapeake Bay for a few miles, then hanging a left into Hampton Roads, then following the southern branch of the Elizabeth River. The Norfolk area is not only a seaport, but also has a large Navy base, so you should not expect to have the waterway all to yourself. These AIS targets in the Norfolk area, which I chose at random from the internet one Saturday morning, will give you some idea of the ship and barge traffic you might encounter as you pass from the Chesapeake into the Norfolk area. In addition to the ships and barges, you will also have to deal with several bridges as you make your way through the Norfolk area. These bridges come in all shapes and sizes. Some of the bridges have the standard 65-foot vertical clearance common on the Intracoastal Waterway. Other bridges will be much lower, and usually these lower bridges will have published opening times. Some of the bridges will not open at all during rush hour. The railroad bridges are typically left in the open position unless a train is approaching. So do your bridge homework before you pass through the Norfolk area. Channel 13 is generally used to talk to bridge operators, lock operators, and also to monitor commercial traffic. Once a southbound boat passes under the Interstate 64 bridge, you will need to make a navigational decision that has two options. The first option is to hang a right and go into Deep Creek. Head upstream a few miles and then pass through the lock there. This lock will put you in the Dismal Swamp Canal. The Dismal Swamp Canal is bound by the Deep Creek lock at the north end and the South Mills lock at the south end. The canal is 22 miles long, but it tends to be a bit, shall we say, width challenged. In 2018, the controlling depth was 10 feet. To the best of my knowledge, there is no commercial traffic in the Dismal Swamp Canal, just yachts and canoes and kayaks. The canal has quite a long history. George Washington was associated with the canal for a while, and there was also some action in that area during the Civil War. In roughly the middle of the canal, there is a visitor center that is very convenient for boaters passing through the area. The Dismal Swamp State Park maintains a building on one side of the canal with historical information, wildlife exhibits, and a walking trail. On the other side of the canal, there is a rest stop for the cars and trucks using Highway 17. On the canal itself, there is a bulkhead where boats can tie up for free overnight. Boaters can use the rest stop bathrooms, but I don't think there are any shower facilities or shore power connections. Once you get south of the South Mills Lock, you will be back in water whose depth is influenced by tidal fluctuations. A southbound boat will pass through Turner's Cut before entering the twists and turns of the Pasquotank River. The Pasquotank eventually takes you to Elizabeth City, which is one of the stops on the Albemarle Loop. Now, let's go back to that Interstate 64 bridge and take a look at a second navigational option for getting to Albemarle Sound. Instead of turning right at Deep Creek, you can keep on trucking down the main channel of the Intracoastal Waterway. You will soon need to pass through the Great Bridge Lock. And hey, guess what they call the bridge next to the Great Bridge Lock? You guessed it, the Great Bridge Bridge. And I guess that would make the bridge tender the Great Bridge Bridge Tender. Gotta love it. From Great Bridge, you will travel along the Albemarle Chesapeake Canal, down North Landing River, through the North Carolina Cut, and eventually end up in Albemarle Sound, roughly 20 miles southeast of Elizabeth City. This route will take you past the towns of Pungo Ferry and Coin Jock. Although I have personally never done the Dismal Swamp Canal option, I get the impression that it is sort of the road less traveled and might save you a few miles as you travel between Norfolk and Elizabeth City. On the other hand, the option of following the main channel of the Intracoastal Waterway is going to be a little more open with perhaps some deeper water, although you need to be alert for barge traffic. Both of these navigational options are popular with the yachting crowd. On Wednesday morning, I picked up my sailing buddy Gregg at the Norfolk airport. Gregg had just survived a grueling red-eye flight from Oregon and was in desperate need of a nap. We still managed to get underway later that afternoon. My marina in Norfolk's Little Creek Inlet is a few miles west of the Chesapeake Bay Bridge Tunnel. We share the inlet with a Navy base, so the channel is nice and deep. If you visit our inlet, make sure you stay near the north shore of the creek, where all the civilian marinas are located. If you get too near the south shore, expect a visit by a nice man in a Navy patrol boat with a machine gun on the foredeck. As Gregg and I followed the shoreline of the Chesapeake Bay, the easterly winds created waves that made steering my boat a real chore. I'm sure Gregg was having second thoughts about whether or not this trip was such a good idea. Thimble Shoal Channel is the route used by ships moving between Norfolk and the Atlantic Ocean. There's a shallow area on the south side of the channel called Willoughby Bank. Avoiding Willoughby Bank involves a lengthy detour for small boats traveling between Little Creek and Hampton roads. So some skippers, who shall remain nameless, will try to sneak through the shallows. When I owned a sailboat, I commonly used the Doug Sneaker route through Willoughby Bank to shorten the detour. But my neighbor told me about his own sneaker route, which was even less of a detour. I decided to try it out that afternoon. My neighbor's extreme sneaker route runs between Fort Wool on one side and a 1 fathom spot on the chart on the other side. Other than our steering challenges in the quartering seas, everything was going well as we approached the extreme sneaker route, until my Garmin chart plotter started giving me a shallow water alarm. We would be cruising along in roughly 15 feet of water when the Garmin would suddenly warn me that we were in only 2.5 feet of water. Since my boat has a 4-foot draft, the 2.5 foot warning could not possibly be correct. Several seconds later, the depth sounder would be back to 15 feet. Then, after a while, the shallow water alarm would happen all over again. After several of these alarms, I lost my nerve and decided to retreat. We made a big detour and headed over to my old, tried and tested Doug's sneaker route. Unfortunately, we went through the exact same shallow water alarm performance. By that time, I was becoming genuinely unimpressed with the occasional 2.5-foot depth readings, so we simply ignored the depth sounder and continued past the Willoughby Bank into the deeper water of Thimble Shoal Channel. Gregg and I followed some ships and barges over the top of the Interstate 64 tunnel somewhere down below us and made our way into Hampton for the night. The steering was much easier in the more protected water, and there is plenty of water depth in the Hampton River if you stay in the well-marked channel. We briefly checked out this area across the river from the Hampton City docks, but I was uncomfortable with the depths I found, so we backed out of there. I later noticed a sailboat anchored in this same general area. Gregg and I then motored under the Settlers Landing Bridge and found anchoring depths more to my liking on the north side of the bridge. We spent a peaceful night there at anchor. It was sunny but chilly on Thursday morning. The Weather Bureau was calling for a very windy afternoon, so we decided to stay put in Hampton for the day. After doing some morning chores and getting the anchor up, Gregg motored us over to Blue Water Yachts, where we filled the port side fuel tank with diesel. We would stop the fueling occasionally to record how many gallons we had taken aboard so far, and the corresponding reading on the sight tube attached to the diesel tank. This allowed me to calibrate my fuel tank. I was now finally able to compute my fuel burn rate with some accuracy. With both engines running, it averaged out to about 2.8 gallons per hour at 7.5 knots, giving my boat a theoretical cruising range of about 1,000 miles. When we were done fueling, we backtracked towards the Settlers Landing Bridge and grabbed a slip at the city dock called the Hampton Public Piers. They had 50-amp electrical service, water, Wi-Fi, and great restrooms and showers. My friend Joe lives in that area, and he took Gregg and I to a great Mexican restaurant in Phobos, where, as usual, I ate way too much yummy food. On Friday morning, I went for a walk and noticed a bird standing outside a little waterfront restaurant. Roughly an hour later, I passed by the same little restaurant and found the bird still standing there. That bird must have really needed his morning cup of coffee. Although our departure from the Hampton Public Piers was anything but graceful, we did manage to provide some entertainment to the guys doing work on the dock's wiring. Most of the day was spent passing through Norfolk to port and Portsmouth to starboard. Some of the shoreline was an attractive downtown area, but most of it was taken up by cargo terminals and shipyards. We were able to pass under all the bridges in Norfolk without stopping that day. although we did have to wait a while for the Great Bridge lock to open. As we tied up inside the lock, I noticed a couple Canadian geese next to us. Initially, I thought they were begging for food. Unfortunately, I discovered too late that Mrs. Goose was sitting on her nest, and Mr. Goose was none too pleased about my parking the boat right next to his wife. If you are looking for a marina in the Great Bridge area, Atlantic Yacht Basin is just east of the Great Bridge Bridge. We spent the night tied to the bulkhead just west of the Great Bridge Bridge. It's free to stay there, but you can only stay 24 hours. There are lots of restaurants in the area, as well as a park adjacent to the north side of the locks. A battle was fought here during the Revolutionary War.